Clint,
Colette,
how's it going?
it's going pretty well. This has been a pretty normal week. Like things have happened that have been
Where
expected to happen, and there haven't been surprises yet.
where's your wood?
Oh, yeah, I'm knocking on it right there.
Are
Yes,
SREs the most superstitious people you know? That's not the podcast question we're going to deal with today.
yes, definitely.
Yeah.
One of those like I must not invoke the chaos gods questions, and I feel weird saying it out loud. Part of me, I'll be perfectly honest. Part of me is like, I could use a little chaos here and there, but I know
something
I'm
to happen.
I'm like skating on thin ice even saying that out loud. I'm sorry to my fellow SREs. I have summoned them. I'm watching the incident channel over here to see how quickly I find out, right?
That's like I follow this mom and ER doctor on Instagram. I'm not on Instagram anymore, but I used to follow her, and she had like a whole summary of like things that you can say in an emergency room that will curse the emergency room, and like that, like literally all ER doctors are like, no, like you
How
can't,
dare you?
don't say these things, like you're going to ruin it.
Definitely.
And I feel like those are there's got to be a list for SREs somewhere too, right? Um, cool.
Yeah, I think I just said like 3 of them. So
Yeah. So,
sorry.
sorry
That's
to
how
Clint's
confident I'm
team
feeling
in
right now.
advance.
Humble me, universe, humble me.
Cool. Uh, the chickens are laying eggs. That's my news.
I was just gonna ask, how are the chickens
Yeah.
doing?
So I was just like admiring them upstairs. We now have 7 eggs that have been laid in the last like 4-5 days. So they're like smaller. They're on the smaller side. I guess probably some of my chickens will, because some of my chickens are on the smaller side. Some of their eggs will be on the smaller side, but then some of the eggs will get bigger as the chickens mature. And yeah, it's very exciting. I did not expect it to be this soon. I thought maybe at some point in February, but it's pretty cool that we're getting eggs.
With the price of eggs, I mean,
I know.
Your riches are mounting.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I feed them organic, bougie food, and like it's definitely, we will not be making money on the chickens. My husband found the first egg. True story. I think he scared it out of the chicken, so like it was surprised, and then like it was like outside. It didn't lay it in the coop, and I think he scared it because he was like putting it back in the coop. He was chasing them around, and so he found it, and he sent me a picture, and I said, "It's our $2,000 egg." Like,
All right.
cool.
I love that. I just imagine like,
yeah. No, that's like what happens though. It's like if they scare themselves. Anyways, it's funny. I also have to think about what it is like to be a chicken who has never laid an egg. Not that they're like as conscious as humans, but if you're a chicken and you've never laid an egg and then suddenly like you lay an egg, like that must be a very strange experience.
I'm sorry, this is now a chicken podcast. We're talking about chickens every time now.
Yeah, it's just, that's what's going to happen. So that's my news. I'm not going to talk about how quiet it is or is not, because I was at an offsite last week. And so, post offsite is a little bit like post holiday. You never know what you're going to get.
Definitely. Some ideas have been cooking.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So we're going to do a just us session. We have some more guests lined up, but not yet, everybody. It's just gonna be Clint and I today. And a question came in actually like yesterday or at some point in the last few days. So thank you, person who sent in a question, because we're looking a little dry, like we're light on questions right now. So if you have questions for the podcast on resilience engineering and software, or chickens, or
Seriously,
resilience engineering and chickens,
questions.
or whatever, please send them in. You can find a link to our Google form at thisisfinepod.com. You can write us at thisisfine.softwarepodcast. Is that what I did? No. What is our email address, Clint? I always forget.
Oh, my memory is as Swiss cheese as any.
I think, okay, well, I had a different screen pulled up because of the question. So it's my bad. Anyways, go to thisisfinepod.com. It's easy to remember. Fill out our form. It's easy to do. Send us some questions. We would love to hear from you. So this question came in. I love how it starts because it's like an "oh really," and it's kind of two questions in one. But let me read it, and we'll pick it apart and talk about it. So I saw Allspa posted something a little spicy on LinkedIn this week.
Shocking.
And it got me wondering about human factors and safety and why the community at large has such a focus on it versus technical factors, external factors, all the other factors when shipping software. I need to convince my management chain that it's the best place to focus too. And I know my personal answer. It's more interesting, but I'd love to know what Colette or Clint would answer. I can think of some from it's the harder one to the human factors influence the technical factors to you can't really easily build resilience to external factors, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure your answers are smarter than mine. Thank you. First of all, our answers are not smarter than you. Second,
Definitely not.
Second of all, Allspa is spicy with the posts lately. Keep it up, John. We're into
Definitely.
it. So when you talk about the community at large, probably what you're talking about is the resilience engineering and software nerds community, which now has a foundation and a Slack. If you're curious, you can go to resilienceandsoftware.org to learn about that. But so why do we have such a large focus on the human factors versus all the other factors?
This one, I feel like this is again one of those ones like, where do I start? Hey, but I do understand. I hear in the question like a problem that they're having, and I've had this problem too. I think you've probably had this problem, which is we sound a little crazy and a little bit like we're trying to sidestep or something the technical factors when we start to talk like this, right? Like our leaders want to hear that there's a technical fix for every incident, and we just haven't done the work, right? We haven't done the technical design, or people start like self-flagellation. And I think I personally have been around that block enough times that when I started to find out about this human factors work, I realized that's what's been missing. That there's not a technical answer to every problem. And that opens you up into falling down the rabbit hole, I think. Is like when you get to that disillusioned place of like, we've tried to check those things and this stuff still keeps breaking. You start to wonder, maybe it is the people.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think that there is this thing of like, when you start to talk about human factors, people can sometimes assume that you are uninterested in technical factors or that you don't care about them or don't think that they matter. And I do, like, speaking as somebody who has worked in many places that lack, core technical components that could improve reliability across the board, right? It's like that matters too. It does matter. Doing that work matters. I think it's just one of those things where if you think about the state, regardless of where any organization is on what I would call its reliability journey, meaning like, you have the right CI in place, you have the right automated testing in place, you have an answer for do we do staging or do we not do staging? Like you have, like, no matter how mature you are on that path, right? There are always human elements to engaging with those systems, to engaging with the guardrails in place, to doing whatever it is you do for your work every day. And if we don't focus on that, then the other stuff kind of doesn't matter. I mean, I think you have to focus on the human factors at least a little bit. I also don't really think that they're like as separate as we make them out to be in our heads. Like, we're all humans in a loop, in multiple loops. And
except the AI. Sorry.
Yeah, not the AI. It's not a
No,
human.
we'll stay off that topic for now. But that point that you're making is exactly what I'm on about. Is we're biased toward the technical because it's a little more in front of us. Like we're at a tech company, we're making software, so problems should have technical answers to us. Like that's a bias that I think we carry. That I'm sure every industry that has some kind of engineering feels the same way, right? If you're in an airplane and an airplane has a problem, like there's probably a mechanic who can fix this, or it's a problem in the design, right? But we're not as good and we're not as self-reflective naturally as engineers, at least, and as people who manage engineers about like, maybe this is completely predictable. The system's complex. There's confusing elements. What I think was a big like click in my head was just a very simple act of talking to the people who are making the technical decisions without an agenda. Right? That was a big change after doing ACL training and going through some learning from incidents. That didn't just click around incidents. I was like, we don't talk about how hard it is to make decisions, even not in the urgent moments, when we're building the system, thinking about how it might break. We think, well, it's just engineering. Just spend the engineering time. You spend more, you get more reliability. You spend less, you get less. But as the complexity mounts, that doesn't actually happen. And that's where I was at that disillusion point, and it sort of like broke it and said, no, we can do some more time on human factors, and that will inform our technical solutions. So now we're actually going to make better decisions. And that's been the argument I've made to the management often is, all those decisions we made where we just sort of were guessing, we're still going to be guessing, but we're going to have more information from reality.
Yeah.
And that should make things better.
Yeah. I absolutely see that. We at the offsite we recently did, we did an exercise that we came up with that's a little informed by resilience engineering, which is, there's this question of how do we improve kind of the overall reliability capabilities of our systems, right? And what we did as an exercise was we took a team that was responsible for a section of the system, and we got them in a room and we said, okay, we're going to draw out just like one user journey through the system, right? And we need you to tell us what all the dependencies are. So we just kind of started going through them, like AWS this, like yada yada here. And there's this staff engineer who is been at the company a long time. This is a very familiar trope, right? Been in the company a long time, knows a lot of things, is standing up there explaining as I'm asking questions, and the staff engineer who works with me is asking questions, and he's explaining everything, and like the people on his team, like ostensibly on his, like people who work with these systems every day, they're like, oh, really? Oh, that's so interesting. Oh, it works like that? Okay, well, what about this? Oh, this makes me think of this other thing, right? And it was just this immediate, like, change in how they were thinking about the systems that they work with every day. And we have outputs from that thing that are going to help us project manage a bunch of stuff, right? Like, there are reasons that we did that are beyond just the light bulb moments in the room at that time. But I don't think it's possible to overvalue generating those light bulb moments for engineers who are working with these systems day in and day out. Our systems are so complex, nobody can understand them in their entirety. And often when people think that they understand even a small portion of them, they don't really. Like, there are things that they assume about the system that end up not being true, whether that's because something changed or whether that's because they misunderstood something that they read, right? And so generating these moments where you can create like awareness and learning about the technical stuff, it turns out helps you have better incidents, make better decisions, right? I think that's really hard to quantify. Like, I think it's hard to correlate precisely,
Yeah, no, therein this is the difficult thing we have in resilience, bringing resilience into tech, is I think tech is used to these virtuous cycles. We find them. CI/CD has a virtuous cycle. You invest in CI/CD, you get some structure, you start to have investments in tests that mean more. There's more collaborative, it's more transparent, right? That's a virtuous cycle. That's why CI/CD has become this like de facto thing. And I have struggled for that. Like you and I feel it. We've seen it play all the way through a few times with the cycle of having people get together and actually agree on what they think the system does, right? That's what you're talking about, which 100% agree. Been through some exercises like that. And it's what's enlightening is when you have the two staff engineers who have been there for a long time and they both want the marker and then they go, no, but what, right? That's like magic. Like you see this understanding start to come together and then they realize that they actually, neither of them know, right? But then we understand that, I think, but then when you try to make an argument for like, let's invest in this as a significant portion of some people's time. That's where we've seen some people successful in that. Yeah, I'm thinking about Alex Ellman, who I think we're going to have later on talk about learning from incidents. But like, it's hard. It's hard to like actually see that cycle play out, even if you do invest in it. I understand what the question our question asker was saying was like, how do I justify this? I see the benefit, but
yeah, I need to convince my management chain. Yeah. So, I mean, I love this because it's like, I think back to 2019, what a beautiful era where we thought that companies cared about the humans who worked there and the culture they created and cared about more than just their bottom line. And lo and behold, we have discovered that perhaps they do not. And I don't want to avoid that reflection and the reality that we face right now. And the fact is that a lot of places have cut investments in all kinds of things at companies, adjusting to financial pressures and for various reasons they're making these cuts. And we know that there are companies who've cut their resilience engineering practices to varying degrees as well alongside that. I think, so to channel John Allspaw for a second, I do think that eventually those companies will face the music around that. Like there is only so far that you can go in terms of ignoring the reality that you're generating and creating around you, right? And so if you decide to disinvest in resilience work, or you decide you're not going to invest it in the first place, that's fine, but like you'll keep on having the same incidents. You will not move forward. I believe that, right? Or
so what you're saying is they're in the fuck around phase.
Right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
you. And it's like, no, I mean, it's like you will eventually get to the find out phase. You eventually do. Everybody does. And then I think it's a question of, well, what do you do, right? What are your solutions to sort of claw your way out? Resilience exists whether we invest in it or not. I think that's another thing to point out to people is resilience engineering is both a practice and a reflection on reality. It is both something that you can influence as well and like actually engineer in a system, but it's also something that just happens because people, turns out, show up to work every day and want to do a good job.
And don't want to be, saddled with toil and interrupts, right. And like they understand, the value probably, in some ways better than anybody who's leading them will.
Right.
And that's why like engineering is the key word here, right? Resilience is there. Let's engineer it rather than just let it sort of organically happen unseen, which is another, I think, big change for me is once I understood what resilience was, I want to go look for it. Like I want to find out more about it. And every time I think we can tell that story in a way that everybody can understand, that does turn light bulbs on in folks. And the hard part is you'll see the light bulb come on And immediately the person with that light bulb goes looking for a metric. Like, right? Like, oh, this is so important. I didn't know all of this and I want to know all of this. And like, how come this isn't in the MTTR, or how come this isn't in the uptime even, or, and that's a great start to the conversation. But I feel like we're still not great at converting that light bulb. Like, I get that this report right here, or this exercise you did, or this dirt exercise, whatever you're doing has value, but where's the cycle? How can I know that it's happening?
And we could probably do 8 shows on metrics and still have things to talk about. But I do think that understanding what a manager or a leader of an organization that's asking for metrics, what is it that they want to accomplish? What are their goals? And when they're asking for these things, how are those metrics going to help with their decision making, right? Because really, at the end of the day, leaders need context, and they need context to help guide the organization with long-term goal planning and setting. They need metrics to help them make better calls, like emergency calls on the fly. Like, do we need to change up what this team is focusing on? Is this, really as bad as it seems? Do I have an emergency where we need to go help part of the organization more than we thought we did? How do I know, as a leader, know what is real and what's not? And we'll probably get into this a little later. We're going to do an episode on ITIL, much to everybody's chagrin. But ultimately, a leader at some point has to decide whether they accept that they have no control or whether they want to maintain the illusion that they have any control at all. And I think that depending on where your leader falls in those camps, you will have varying degrees of success with different tactics for introducing resilience engineering practices, right? So if your leader is totally like, grounded in reality and is like, yes, I have no control. I do not control how the teams show up every day. I don't control, I have some level of influence, but I do not have control. If your leader is accepting of that, I think that you can find certain elements and things to bring up to them that are worthwhile. Look at incidents as opportunities for storytelling, and look at metrics around incidents, not your MTTRs, but maybe how disruptive incidents are to teams being able to get their work done, as a really important sort of factor when you tell the story of why resilience matters. That would be my number one piece of advice. If your leader is not in the reality club about the fact that they don't have control over stuff, I think it becomes harder, right? Because if they believe that they, are going to push a button and someone down the management chain at the engineering level is going to do a thing, if that's how they choose to think about their leadership sort of practices, I think it becomes harder to tell a story that resonates with them, because nothing in resilience engineering lends itself towards that correlative, if then push button, make somebody code thing, right?
We're actually deconstructing the illusion of that control, right?
Okay.
That's what's uncomfortable. I had a thought that were the Stoics the original resilience engineers, right? like Marcus Aurelius, classic resilience engineering maven. We haven't talked about it, but that is a big part of it, right? It's just let's focus on what you do have control over, right? Because you mentioned a metric that I have actually found has resonated with folks, which is that cost of coordination. I've actually sent Laura McGuire's talk from a few years ago about it. It really resonates because it tells a story through NASA, but then relates it to what we do. That idea that you do actually control how to draw the boundaries between parts of the system and how to make sure teams understand who is doing what, and so that you don't have incidents that just grow, right? And so that you do have engineering efforts that can stay contained. That stuff is stuff that will ultimately result in better resilience and having resilience be more seen because you know where to look for it versus when it's just under the covers. So I do feel like there's an evolution that has to happen on a personal level for everybody who encounters this work of like, it's a little uncomfortable to realize how out of control and how complex the world is. And a lot of us need to tell the narrative to people above us that it's not.
Have it all under control is a thing that people say to their bosses for a reason, right? It's under control. Yeah. It's under control.
And their bosses like, you got this, right? And like, you go on to say, no one's got this. Like, that's not going to fly. This actually steers me in another topic that I really like to highlight about the human factors work and resilience work is that realizing how much of what we do is just about the narrative and accepting that. Like, don't fight it. The narratives are important. Like, there are people who are not on board yet. There are people who are too busy to want to understand the complexity. And if you don't have a way to talk to them that you can stand by and say, I said things that I know to be true, but also helps them let go and say, okay, they've got this. Mm-hmm. Like, that is a critical element of what resilience engineering ends up being and why we still have root cause analysis around, because, you may not have evolved enough in your org to let go of that as a practice, but you can certainly write them in a way that's more resilience focused and say, yeah, this is a root cause analysis. Right? Whatever you need, I'm giving you the narrative.
Yeah, like, definitely pick your battles there. Like, ship all the RCA reports with all of the contributing factors in them, right? Like, yes. Just ignore. I think there is like this really healthy amount of like nodding and smiling and like giving people what they think that they need and then serving them the thing that they actually need alongside it until, and in some ways maybe they won't. And this is what I think about a lot, actually, when I think about the resilience engineering teams that have been disbanded or reorganized recently. It's like a lot of those leaders don't actually understand the consequence of those decisions until after they don't have it anymore. And then if amount of time passes and a big incident happens and they don't have that report, they don't have that information, they don't have that rich data to look at to try to understand what's happening in their organizations better. It's like, by that point, it's kind of too late. Like, you've already done the thing, you've already sort of disassembled, but you can reassemble, you can sort of consider what it is that matters in your organization.
It takes a while too. It takes a while for that find out phase that you keep coming back to.
And look, so much of I'm like both a Charles Perrowian, if that's a term, who wrote Normal Accidents, who's like, basically anything complex enough, it's just bound to happen, right? Like, it will eventually happen. But I'm also very aware, like, people get lucky, and resilience doesn't just disappear in organizations; it sticks around. And so resilience helps you out a lot more than you think, like, or than you know about. So, yeah. But eventually,
I've said this in the past too. I don't think I've said it in this podcast. Until human factors and resilience is on the promotion packet for the engineers, until it's represented, and I'm sure it is in some places. I have not seen it. This will always be a hard conversation, but once you've got people who know that it's okay and it's important and it's promoted to engage in these activities, you're going to see a lot more of it. It's like the opposite of you get less of what you tax. It's like you get more of what you promote. Right?
Yeah.
So, being able to actually spell out, like, see here where people are spending time learning about the system, they're doing these investigations, like, let's promote those people. Let's make sure that they are in leadership positions and teaching the people below them to maintain that resilience cycle.
Yeah. And I think back to what Steve McGee told us when he was a guest on here, right? Which is, that Google SRE story, which is essentially like SRE was a thing at Google and a bunch of people did the thing at Google and they kind of all scattered throughout right? And I think that, while there might be many definitions of SRE, scattered across the place now, like if you've worked with a Google SRE, you kind of know it. If you've worked in a place that's been led by people who were Google SREs or who experienced that, you have this sense of, here is what matters, here is how this works, here is how we do things that's a part of our culture. And I think my hope, right, is that in some ways we get the same thing happening with resilience engineering, that if you've worked in a place that has done this well before, that you may move to a different place and bring some of those practices and kind of do that work. Even on the sly, the more you do it, people are hungry to learn this stuff. There's always in all of the resilience engineering Slacks I've been in, there's a channel called Guerrilla Factors or Guerrilla Methods or something, where it's like, how are you sneaking it in, right? How are you doing it without saying you're doing it?
What are you stapling to the monthly report? It's like, what's this second page? Right? Yeah, for sure. That resonates definitely. And I think like bringing back to the original question about like, why not technical stuff? Why so much of this, right? Like you need both, right? You have your credibility because of your, whatever you're doing technically. I don't know that there are many folks who are like hiring purely resilience engineering professionals into the software world. And that's where that Guerrilla Factors comes in. If you've learned along with us and you are yearning for more resilience in your company and they're pushing you for technical, I would say both. Like you need to staple that extra narrative to the report. You need to write it in a way where it helps people ask a question like, what are you on about here? Like, I like that one, right? It's like, there's a lot of stuff about people in here. Where's the stuff about the databases, right? That's your opportunity. So it can be a risk, but I've only seen it be a reward where a lot of people will also reach out and be like, thank you for finally saying this, right? I've seen that a few times where, I remember I had an experience where every time there was a bad reliability result at this company, the response from leadership was, and we have added monitors, right? And like that. So see, now we're up to 1,500 monitors.
It's as good as adding tests, Clint.
And right, yeah, we've increased test coverage to 86%. And like, I can see why, because that put people at ease. But when we came through and said, no, we're actually going to reduce the amount of monitors because what we have is sense-making problems, not like things breaking and not being detected problems. Privately, people reach out like, thank you. Like, we're just like inundated with monitors. We feel like we had to write them. So once you have that experience, I think this is why I focus so much on this at work. I want to bias towards helping people make that shift and seeing the benefit.
And I think, before I knew what resilience engineering was, sometimes I'm still not sure I know what it is, but before I thought I knew or began to understand what it was, I still understood that, which was, oh, this incident happened and we need to look at how these folks engage with the systems they have in place. And I understood that like monitor noise was a problem, right? So these aren't foreign concepts to people already, and they are also resilience engineering ones. And so it's also important to remember that like we already buy into a lot of these things. Like we already have that. I could do a whole nother episode on the one I hear a lot, which is, well, we just don't have time.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And of course, Allspaw has another favorite question that he likes to throw at people, which is, do any of your organizations engage in code review? How much time do they spend on code review? And, how does that, work? I think like to folks who are worried about time, what I say is like, yeah, like you don't. First of all, you don't do an in-depth incident analysis for every single incident you have, obviously. And second, like do one and wait a month and see how it goes. I don't know, but like just try it.
See how long it takes before someone sends it back to you and says like, wait, we see this now, right? Yeah. Like the toe in the water approach for sure.
Yeah. I want to say the 4 that we've done at most recent gig, it's like part of an onboarding packet that I send to new people who come to me, right? I'm like, here are the 4 in-depth incident analyses. One of these is probably related to an organ that we're part of the org that you work in. Like, if you want to know some things, here you go. And that in and of itself is very valuable for me because I don't have to spend time telling stories about, all the 3 different incidents that had the same theme or something like that. It's like, you can just see it right here. You can just read it.
That alone should be enough benefit. Like we're writing these so that we can actually make people effective at their jobs.
Yeah.
Sounds like we need to do an episode on incidents, specifically learning from incidents, which we're going to do.
Yes.
By the way.
Yes, I'm so excited. Yeah. So thanks, reader, for writing us in. We were very lonely on our Google form. Our Google form had 12 questions in it, and then it had 13, and I was so excited. I just went, woo! So thank you for writing in. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We are going to queue up some more episodes for you as soon as we can. I'm going on vacation next week, though. First, I'm going to hang out in Mexico and go to a lagoon where there are whales. I'm very excited.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. I don't know what I'll bring back. I'll bring back at least some pictures, hopefully, but it should be good. So we'll be on break, or I think I'm going to post this before I go on vacation, and then we'll come back at you with some special guests and some new subject matter. You can ask us questions at thisisfinepod.com. I forgot our email address, but it's on some other episodes, so go ahead, find our email too. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Clint.
Have a good one, Clint.